Later, Wren Ashby would think that the bell had tried to warn her. It rang the way it always rang, 2 notes, the second a half-beat late, as though it could not decide whether the news was worth the ringing. At 6 minutes past 4, on the last grey Tuesday of the season, and she did not look up, because she did not yet know that the man shaking rain from a coat in the doorway of her little bed and breakfast was the billionaire who had once been married to her sister. She would know it in a moment. She would recognize him the instant she raised her head, and she would say nothing. And that nothing would become the whole shape of everything that came after. The bell over the door of the Saltglass Inn had always had that particular voice. Wren had heard it sound 10,000 times. She knew its moods, the way she knew the tide tables tacked to the kitchen wall, the way she knew which of the 7 stairs would complain if you stepped on it wrong. So when it rang that last grey Tuesday, with the rain coming sideways off the harbour, and the light already failing, she finished the small task in her hands before she looked. "That'll be your storm guest," Sully said from the kitchen doorway, drying a pan that had been dry for 10 minutes. "Or a man who's lost. Hard to tell the difference this time of year." Wren straightened the stack of registration cards so their edges lined up with the lip of the front desk. She did it without thinking, the way she always did when the bell rang and a stranger came in out of the weather. Then she lifted her head, the welcome already shaped in her mouth, and the welcome stayed there, unspoken, behind her teeth. The man in the doorway was shaking the rain from a charcoal coat that had cost more than the inn made in a month. He was tall, dark-haired, going silver at one temple with the kind of stillness that wealthy men wore like a second coat. Water ran off him onto her clean floor. He was looking past her at the lamplit room, at the worn settee and the brass barometer and the fire she had laid an hour ago, and he had the expression of a man who had walked a very long way to find somewhere no one knew his name. She knew his name. She had known his name for 9 years. She had known his face since she was 20 years old, and standing at the back of a church she could not, bought the shoes for, watching her sister marry him. She knew the exact tilt of his jaw from 100 magazine covers, from the news, from the photographs that had run beside the words cold and ruthless, and the husband who let her go. Elliot Vance was standing in her doorway, dripping on her floor, and he did not know her at all. The unanswered thing rose up in her chest, large and quiet, and she pressed it down the way she pressed everything down. "Welcome to the Saltglass," she said. Her voice came out even. "You'll want to get out of that coat." That was all. She said nothing else. She did not say the other thing. The thing that was now sitting in the room with the 3 of them like a 4th guest. And she watched him cross the floor toward her and had no idea yet that her whole quiet life had just ended on 2 late notes of a bell. Elliot Vance set a single leather bag on the floor and looked at the register she pushed toward him as though he had forgotten how a pen worked. "You have a room," he said. It was not quite a question. Men like him did not ask whether there was a room. They assumed the world had been keeping one ready. "I have 5, Wren said. "You can have your pick. The blue one faces the water, but the water tonight is mostly going to sound like it's angry at you." Something moved at the corner of his mouth and was gone. "The blue one," he said. He signed the register. She turned it without looking eager too, the way you turned a thing you were not supposed to care about. He had written E. Vance in a hand that pressed hard on the downstrokes. Not a false name. He had not even bothered to hide. That told her something, that he believed, all the way down, that no one in a town like this would know the difference between him and any other. Tired man with money. He had come here precisely because he thought he was no one here. "How long will you be staying, Mr. Vance?" The name did not catch in her throat. She was proud of that, later when she had time to be proud of small awful things. "A week," he said, "possibly less. I'll pay for the week regardless." "It's the off-season. You don't have to." "A week," he said again, in a tone that closed the subject, the way a heavy door closes, and reached for his card. Behind her, Sully made a small sound that in another woman would have been a laugh. "Dinner's at 7, she told him, the way she told everyone, as though informing them of a law of physics. "There's no menu, there's what I make. The ocean's still wet, in case you were planning to ask about that, too." For 1 second, Elliot Vance looked at the old woman, as though she were the first genuinely surprising thing he had encountered in some time. Then the second passed, and his face closed again, and Wren handed him the heavy brass key with the blue tag and tried not to let her fingers tell the truth. Her face was hiding. "Third stair from the bottom sticks," she said. "Mind it." He took the key. He climbed the stairs, and on the third one from the bottom, the old wood groaned under his weight. And he stopped, and she watched the back of him register that she had told him true. And something in the set of his shoulders changed by a fraction. Then he went up into the dark of the landing and was gone, and Wren let out a breath she had been holding, it felt like, for 9 years. "Well," Sully said, "you've gone the color of the tablecloth. It's cold." Sully hung the pan that did not need hanging. It's October. It's always cold. You went white when he came through that door like you'd seen the drowned." She studied Wren with her flat, kind, unfooled eyes. "You know him." Wren aligned the registration cards again, though they had not moved. The lie was right there, easy, the kind she had told her whole life to keep the peace. "He's just a face I've seen in a magazine. Everyone's seen that face." The lie would cost nothing. It would keep the evening calm. It would let the man upstairs eat Sully's fish, and sleep in the blue room, and leave in a week never knowing he had spent it under the roof of the family he believed had ruined him. "No," Wren said. "I don't know him." Sully held her gaze 1 beat longer than was comfortable. "All right," she said, and went back into the kitchen, and the matter was, for the moment, closed. Except that Wren stood at the desk a long time afterward, in the orange light of the lamp she could barely afford to keep burning, and listened to the rain throw itself against the windows, and understood with a flat, cold certainty that she had just told the first lie of a week that was going to be made entirely out of them. Upstairs, a floorboard shifted under a careful, expensive step. The most powerful man she had ever stood beside was 40 feet above her head, and he had come to her door to disappear, and she was the one person in the world who could not let him. She turned off the lamp she did not need, and left the one she did, and went to help Sully with the fish. The thing about a man trying to vanish is that he carries the noise of himself with him. Wren learned this over the next 2 days, watching Elliot Vance attempt to be nobody in a 5-room inn at the wrong end of the year. He was bad at it, in the specific way of someone who had spent 20 years being the most important person in every room, and had never once practiced the opposite. He came down to breakfast at the same minute each morning, sat at the same window table with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door, and read 3 newspapers, cover to cover, as if there might be a quiz. He never asked for anything, which meant he was always quietly waiting to be offered the thing he wanted, which was a kind of asking so old in him he no longer heard it. She brought him coffee. He drank it. He left exact money on the table, though the room rate covered breakfast. And the first morning the money was too much, and when she tried to give it back, he looked at her with such genuine bafflement that she understood overpaying was simply the shape his hands made. He did not know another way to be in a room with a person who served him. "It's included," she said. "The coffee. You're paying for it already. Keep it. I don't want a tip, Mr. Vance. I want you to drink your coffee and let me clear the cup." That stopped him. He set the cup down with the precision of a man diffusing something. "Vance is fine," he said. "Just Vance. That's not a first name." "No," he agreed, and offered nothing else. And Wren took the cup and the too much money and went back behind the desk and put the extra bills in the jar. Sully kept for the church roof, because she would be damned before she'd spend his money on herself, and was annoyed at how much that small private refusal pleased her. She told herself it was simple. She told herself, he stays a week, he leaves, the secret leaves with him, and the inn keeps its head above water. For one more winter on the strength of a guest who pays for 5 rooms and uses 1. She had spent 2 years keeping the salt glass alive on exactly this kind of a luck. A film crew needing a place to park, a wedding that overflowed the church hall, a developer's surveyor who tipped in cash. She could survive a week of Elliot Vance the way she survived everything. Quietly, with the truth folded up small and put away in the drawer where she kept all the other things it was kinder not to say. The trouble was the inn itself, which had opinions. The Blue Room's radiator knocked. The hot water ran out at the worst possible angle of the morning. The 3rd stair stuck, and the kitchen door swelled in the damp, and the whole house creaked and settled and complained like the old living thing it was. And Wren, who loved it the way you love something that needs you, watched the richest hotelier on the eastern seaboard move through it, noticing every flaw with the helpless attention of a man who could not switch off the part of his brain that had built an empire out of getting these exact details right. The radiator in the Blue Room, he said on the 2nd evening, finding her in the front hall with a basket of folded towels against her hip. The valve's failing. It's not the air in the line, it's the valve. You can hear it in the rhythm of the knock. I can hear it in the rhythm of my sleep, Wren said. It's been knocking since March. You could replace it for $40 and an afternoon. I could replace a great many things for $40 and an afternoon. The afternoons are the part I'm short on. She shifted the basket. Is the room not to your liking? I can move you to the green one. The green one doesn't knock. The green one just whistles. He almost smiled again. She was beginning to catalogue the near smiles, the way Sully catalogued the weather. The small atmospheric events that told you what was coming. The blue one's fine, he said. I sleep poorly everywhere. At least here it's interesting. It was the most personal thing he had said, and he seemed surprised to have said it, and he covered the surprise by nodding once and going up to his interesting failing room, minding the 3rd stair without being told, and Wren stood in the hall, holding warm towels and hating, with sudden clarity, how easy he was to like when you forgot for 30 seconds whose ruin he was supposed to be. Because that was the trouble underneath the trouble, the man the magazines had built, the cold one, the one who let her go, the husband whose money was the only warm thing about him. That man was easy. Wren had hated that man comfortably for years. He was simple to hate because he was simple, the way a headline is simple. This man read 3 newspapers because the silence frightened him. This man overpaid because being owed was the only intimacy he trusted. This man could hear a marriage failing in the rhythm of a knock, and could not, apparently, save anything that mattered to him with $40 and an afternoon. This man was not simple at all, and Wren did not want him to be standing in her hall being not simple. Because she had a letter in a drawer upstairs that she had been not thinking about since the second the bell rang. She had not lied to Sully about everything. She did not know him. That part was even true. She knew his name and his face and the public story of him. She knew the shape of the hole he had left in her family. But the man going up her stairs, she did not know him at all. And the not knowing was starting, against every instinct she had spent a lifetime building, to feel like a question instead of a wall. You're doing the thing with the cards again, Sully observed, passing through with a colander of muscles, lining them up. You only do that when something's loose in you. Nothing's loose in me. Sully paused at the kitchen door. He asked me today how long you'd had the place. I told him it was your mother's. He asked what happened to your mother. She let that sit. I told him she passed 2 winters back, and it wasn't my story to tell the rest. Her eyes, when they found Wren's, were not unkind, but they were not going to be lied to twice. He's a guest, Wren. Whatever he is to you, he's leaving Tuesday. Just be careful which version of yourself you let him meet. You've only got the one, and you've been keeping most of it in a drawer." She went into the kitchen before Wren could answer, which was a mercy, because Wren did not have an answer. She had a drawer, and in the drawer, under the spare keys and the silent phone and the rubber bands, she had a bundle of letters in a man's hard, downstroke-heavy hand, addressed to her sister, never opened, that her mother had kept for reasons she had taken with her, and that Wren had been carrying like a stone in the gut for 2 years without ever once deciding what she was for. She had thought, when she found them, that they belonged to the past. She had thought the man who wrote them was a closed book in another country. The man who wrote them was upstairs, in the blue room, listening to a valve fail in the dark, and she was the only one who knew it. By the second day, the town had noticed him. It could not be helped. Pearl Harbor in October had 40 year-round souls and a long memory, and a strange car with city plates parked 2 days outside the Saltglass was a more interesting event than anything that had happened since the Brackett's boat sank in the spring. People found reasons to walk past. The Halloran sisters came in to buy jam they did not need. Tom Brander, who ran the harbor and had been gently, patiently, hopelessly trying to take Wren to dinner for 1.5 years, found his way to her desk with a flimsy excuse about a delivery, stood there with his open, easy face, and looked at the city coat hanging on the hall hook, and looked at Wren, and did the math out loud the way Tom did everything. "Reckon that's a fella with money," he said. "Reckon it is. Reckon he's the type that'll buy the whole street if he likes the view, and not notice the people on it." Tom said it lightly, but there was an old worry under it. The worry of a town that had watched the coast get expensive one bought-up house at a time. Bartlett says there's a development outfit been sniffing the harbor end. Says they want the whole row, the cannery, the lot, this place. He nodded at the inn around them, at the barometer and the worn settee and the fire. "You'd tell me, Wren, if somebody made you an offer, you wouldn't just up and sell the last real thing on this water without telling a soul." Wren felt the old reflex move in her, the soothing half-truth, the keep the peace, the "it's all fine, Tom, don't you worry." It rose in her like water finding its level. She had survived her whole life on that reflex. It had buried her mother under a comfortable lie, and it had kept this town calm, and it had let a man named Vance walk up her stairs 2 days running, believing he was nobody. "If somebody made me an offer," she said slowly, "I'd think hard about it, Tom. The roof needs $8,000 I don't have. The boiler needs replacing before it replaces itself. I love this house. Loving a house doesn't pay for the house." She watched his open face fall a careful inch and made herself keep going, because for once the true thing felt more like a kindness than the gentle one. "I'm not selling this week, but I'd tell you, I'm done not telling people things." It was not a large confession. Tom would not even understand it as one. But it landed in Wren strangely, like a coin dropped down a well she'd assumed was dry, the splash arriving a long way down. "Well," Tom said, recovering, easy again, "that's all I'd ask. Buy you dinner Friday? The gulls doing the last lobster before they close up. Ask me Thursday. I always ask you Thursday, and I always say ask me Thursday," Wren said, and Tom grinned, because this was their joke, the small, safe circling joke of 2 people who both knew it would never be Friday, and he tipped 2 fingers off an imaginary hat and went back out into the bright, cold wind off the water. She did not see Elliot Vance standing on the landing. She did not know how long he had been there, how much he had heard, until she turned to take the jam the Halloran sisters had abandoned back to the pantry and found him halfway down the stuck-stair flight, one hand on the banister, watching her with an expression she could not read and did not like the unreadability of. "The roof needs $8,000, he said. It was not a question. He had heard. Of course he had heard. The house carried sound like a held breath. Wren felt heat climb her neck. Not embarrassment, exactly. something more dangerous than embarrassment. She did not want this man's pity. She did not want this man's checkbook. She warned, with an intensity that frightened her, for this man not to look at her struggling house the way he must have looked at 1,000 struggling things he then either bought or let die. "It needs a great many things," she said, lifting her chin. "It's an old house. Old houses are mostly a list of needs with a roof on top, when the roof's working." She set the jam on the desk between them like a small glass wall. "You don't have to do the thing your face is doing, Mr. Vance." "What is my face doing?" "Adding it up. The roof, the boiler, the valve, the third stair, pricing me." She had not meant to say it that bluntly. It came out anyway, 2 years of held truth, using the smallest crack to get through. "I've seen the look. People with money get it around people without it. Like we're a project that's behind schedule." For a long moment, he said nothing. The wind found the green room and made it whistle, far off, like a kettle in another life. And then Elliot Vance did something she did not expect, something that undid a small, careful stitch in her. He came the rest of the way down the stairs, minding the third one, and he looked at the jam and the desk and the worn, beautiful room, and he said, very quietly, "I wasn't pricing you. I was thinking that whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing, and someone has kept it standing on almost nothing for a long time, and that takes a kind of." He stopped. His hand moved to the inside of his left wrist, pressed there where a watch was not. "I build places that pretend to be this," he said. "I have never once managed to build a place that actually is this. I was adding that up. Not you." The honesty of it sat between them, raw and unguarded, and clearly costing him something. And Wren, who had a drawer upstairs full of this exact man's unread honesty, felt the stone in her gut shift and grow heavier, and understood that the most dangerous thing in the house that week was not going to be the failing valve or the $8,000 roof. It was going to be the truth and how badly all of a sudden she wanted to stop sitting on it. "Dinner's at 7, she said, because she did not trust herself with any other words, and picked up the jam and went into the pantry and stood in the dark among the shelves, with her heart going like the radiator, and waited for it to be quiet enough to come back out. The storm that had been threatening since Tuesday finally arrived on Thursday night, and it arrived with a purpose. It took the power out at 8:30, while Wren was clearing the last of dinner, and Elliot was at the window table, pretending to read by the fire. The lights did not flicker first, the polite warning a town gave you. They simply went, all at once, the inn dropping into the deep particular dark of a coast, with no other lights for miles, and the storm filled the silence the electricity left behind. The rain a steady roar on the old slates, the wind leaning on the house with both hands, the harbour below throwing itself at the seawall, and the seawall for now holding. "There's the line down at the neck," Sully said, unbothered from the kitchen. She had cooked through worse storms than this on a wood range, and considered electricity a recent and overrated fashion. "They'll have it back by morning, or they won't." "Lamps are in the dresser, Wren. Mind the man doesn't break his neck on your famous stair." Wren lit the hurricane lamps one by one, the old ritual, the small flames steadying the room back into existence, the settee, the barometer, the man at the window watching her hands. She set one lamp on his table and one on the desk, and carried one for herself, and the inn became, in the lamplight, the thing it had been built to be 100 years before any of them. A warm box of light on a dark coast, holding off the weather, holding a few souls together against the size of the night. "Does this happen often?" Elliot asked. "Often enough that I know where the lamps are. Not so often it stops being." She searched for the word and found, to her own surprise, the true one. "Beautiful. It's terrible for business, and it's beautiful. Both things." She set her own lamp down. "You can go up if you'd rather, or you can sit. The fire'll hold a few hours, and there's nowhere drier in 40 miles. He stayed. That was the night it began in earnest. The thing she would spend the rest of the week trying not to name, with the power gone, and the phones reduced to dark glass, and the world cut down to one room of moving light. Elliot Vance had nothing to read, and nowhere to be, and no empire to run, and the silence he could not bear came for him, and instead of fleeing up the stairs, he sat in it, in the chair by the fire, and slowly, the way a tide comes in over flats, so flat you cannot see it move until it is already around your ankles, he began to talk. Not about himself. He was too well defended for that, even gutted by the dark. He asked about the house, and Wren, who could talk about the house, the way other people talked about their children, told him. About the sea captain who built it, and the daughters who ran it as a boarding house through 2 wars. About the winter the harbour froze, and they fed half the town from the kitchen. About her mother buying it half-ruined and spending 30 years putting it right one board at a time. She talked, and he listened the way no one had listened to her in years, with his whole still attention, asking the exact right small question at the exact right moment, and the lamplight moved on his face and made him look younger, and less guarded and more like the man who had written the letters in her drawer than the man on the magazine covers. "You love it," he said, when she ran down at last. "The house. You talk about it the way." He stopped, and his hand went to the inside of his wrist. "The way I used to think I'd talk about something, someday. Before I understood, I wasn't built for the someday kind of thing. Everyone's built for it." "No," he said, with no self-pity, only the flat report of a man stating a fact he had made peace with. "Some of us are built to build the houses other people love. That's not nothing. It's just not the same." He turned the dark glass of his phone over in his long fingers. "I had a someday once. I was even married to it for a while. I was very bad at it. I was so busy keeping the someday funded that I forgot to live in it. And by the time I looked up, the word stopped against his teeth. He did not say her name." Wren had noticed over 4 days that he never said her name. The avoidance was so complete, it had become a kind of presence. The silence in the shape of a woman. She found someone who knew how to live in the someday instead of paying for it. He finished. "I don't blame her. I've never blamed her. The story says I was cold. The story's mostly right." And there it was, the whole false architecture of him, laid out by his own hand in the firelight. The man who had read the headline about himself so many times he had moved into it, who had let the world call him cold, because cold was simpler to be than to explain. Who carried the blame for a marriage, for Wren knew, for a fact, in a man's hard handwriting upstairs, had not failed the way the world had decided it failed. She could have told him then. The truth was right there, hot in her mouth, and the dark and the storm and the lamplight had made a room where it might have been possible to say it. "I know who you are. I'm her sister. And she lied to all of you, and my mother kept the proof, and it's been 40 feet over your head every night you've slept in the blue room. You weren't only cold. You were also lied about. I have the letters you wrote her. She never opened a single one. She could have given him that. It would have been the truest kindness she had ever offered a human being. And she said nothing, because the moment she said it, she stopped being Wren of the Saltglass and became Naomi's sister, and everything warm in the room would curdle into the thing she had watched curdle people her whole life. And because under that fear was the older, deeper one, the one she had never said aloud to anyone, that the truth, when she finally let it out, would not heal anything at all, that it would only do what truth had always done in her family. Detonate. Cost. Take the warm box of light and put it out. So she straightened a lamp that did not need straightening, and she said, "The story's never mostly right. The story's just the part that fit on the cover." And she watched that land in him like a struck match, and hated herself, and went to bank the fire. The lights did not come back by morning. They did not come back by noon either. The line at the neck had taken a pole with it, and the crew was 3 towns over dealing with worse, and Pearl Harbor settled into the cheerful emergency of a place that had done without before. Sully cooked on the wood range. Wren hauled water and filled lamps and put a hand-lettered sign on the door. No vacancy, no power, coffee's still hot. And the day took on the strange suspended quality of weather days, time going loose and slow, the ordinary rules relaxed. Elliot Vance, with no newspapers delivered, and no signal to check, and nothing whatsoever to be important about, was at a loss so total it was almost funny. Wren found him at 10 in the morning, standing in the front hall holding a flashlight, looking at the failed valve on the blue room radiator the way other men looked at the sea. $40 and an afternoon, he said. I have the afternoon. I appear to have nothing but the afternoon. You're a guest. I'm a guest who can't read, can't work, can't sleep, and can hear that valve failing in a rhythm that is going to end me. Let me fix the valve, Wren. For the love of God, I built a $400 million company, and I cannot remember the last time I fixed an actual thing with my actual hands. He held up the flashlight like evidence. Sully says the toolbox is under the stairs. Sully has agreed to supervise. Sully has frankly already insulted my competence twice, and I haven't picked up a wrench. From the kitchen, Sully's voice arrived dry as driftwood. 3 times. The radiator's not the only thing in this house with a failing valve. And Wren laughed. It came out of her before she could stop it. A real laugh, startled out of the careful quiet she kept herself folded into, and she saw it hit. Elliot Vance, like weather, saw his face open with surprise and then, helplessly, with something that on a less guarded man would have been delight. He had made her laugh. Or Sully had, and he had handed it to her, and he was looking at her laughing, as though he had personally invented it, as though he had not known until this exact second, in a powerless inn on a road's end coast, that he was a man who could be in a room where someone laughed and feel like he belonged in it. Fine, Wren said when she had her face back. Fix the valve, but the toolbox is older than you, and the wrench you want is the one that looks like it's given up on life. And if you flood the blue room, you're paying for the floor. If I flood the blue room, Elliot said, with the first genuine lightness she had heard from him. Already. Shrugging out of the charcoal coat and rolling the sleeves of a shirt that had certainly never been near a radiator, I'll buy you a new floor, a new house, and a new town, and I'll still have done a better job than whoever installed this valve, who, I would like it on the record, was a criminal. It was a joke. A small, dry, self-aware joke, the first real one he had made, and he made it on the 4th day, near the middle of the week, and Wren caught Sully's eye over his bent head as he wrestled the toolbox out from under the stairs, and Sully gave the very smallest nod. The nod of a woman who had watched a great many people thaw in this kitchen over 40 years and knew the sound of the ice going. He fixed the valve. It took him 3 hours, 2 trips to consult Sully, 1 genuinely impressive bout of swearing, and a degree of concentration he had probably last spent on a hostile takeover, and when the knock finally stopped, when the blue room radiator ticked over into a clean, steady warmth for the first time since March, Elliot Vance stood up with grease on his $200 shirt, and a streak of it across his jaw, and a look on his faces of such uncomplicated triumph that Wren had to turn away and pretend to be doing something with the lamps, because the truth in her drawer had just become almost too heavy to carry. And she did not want him to see her nearly set it down. That night the power came back at last, the inn humming back to electric life, the spell of the dark days broken, and a black car with city plates came down the harbour road through the last of the rain and stopped outside the Jane. Salt glass, and a man got out who did not have to sign the register because he was not staying, and Wren knew, before he reached the door, before the bell sounded its 2 late notes, that the warm box of light had just run out of time. The man at the door was younger than Elliot, harder in a newer way, dressed for a city that was nowhere near this water. He did not shake the rain off. He did not look at the fire. He looked at Wren the way an auditor looks at a number that is wrong, and he said, "I'm looking for Elliot Vance. Don't tell me he isn't here. The car's outside and I've had a very long drive. And you are? Dominic Vance, his brother. A beat. Here's where we are. He's been off the grid 4 days. The board meets Monday. There's a journalist who knows he's gone to ground and is 2 phone calls from finding out where. And I have driven 6 hours to bring him home before he sets fire to 20 years of work, feeling sorry for himself in." He glanced around, pricing it the exact way Wren had accused Elliot of pricing it, except that Dominic meant it. "Wherever this is, so. Is he here, or do I keep being charming? Dominic." Elliot's voice came from the stairs. He stood on the landing in his grease-streaked shirt, the lightness of the afternoon draining out of him visibly, his shoulders resetting into the armor. Wren had watched him take off board by board over 4 days. She felt the loss of it like cold air from an open door. "You found me," Elliot said. "Congratulations. Go home. I'll be back Monday." "You'll be back tonight," Dominic said. "We need to talk, and we're not going to do it in front of the E." He turned to Wren, and his eyes did something then that she would replay later, again and again, trying to find the moment it happened. They went from her face to the framed photographs on the wall behind the desk, the old ones, her mother and the inn, and, at the end of the row in a small tarnished frame, the wedding photo nobody had ever taken down, because taking it down would have been a story too. 2 sisters in the church doorway, 20 years old and 24, squinting into a long Argo sun. Dominic Vance stopped talking. Wren watched him read the photograph, watched him read the resemblance. The same jaw, 9 years older now, the same way of standing. Watched the auditor in him find the number that was wrong and understand, with a speed that told her exactly how dangerous he was, precisely how wrong it was, and whose, and what it might be worth. "Elliot," Dominic said slowly, not taking his eyes off Wren, his voice gone very quiet and very careful. "Come down here. Come look at this picture." And Wren stood behind her desk in the warm electric light, with 9 years of silence coming due all at once, and did the only thing she had ever known how to do. She said nothing. Elliot came down the stairs. He minded the 3rd one out of habit now, which undid her a little even then. And he crossed to the row of photographs and bent to the small tarnished frame his brother was pointing at, and Wren watched the most important seconds of her week arrive and could not move inside them. He looked at the photo a long moment, 2 young women in a church doorway, squinting into a sun 9 years gone, and his face, she made herself watch his face, did not change the way Dominic's had. There was no recognition in it. Why would there be? He had met her exactly once, across a crowded reception, when she was 20 and invisible, and he had eyes for no one but the bride. He had spent 4 days with a woman of 29 who ran an inn on a forgotten coast, and there was nothing in a faded snapshot of a squinting girl to connect the two. He saw a stranger's family. He saw the past he had come 300 miles to stop seeing. "It's an old wedding photo," he said, straightening, his voice gone flat and careful at the mere proximity of the subject. "What about it?" And Wren saw Dominic make a decision. She watched it happen behind his hard young eyes, watched the auditor weigh the number in his hand and decide not to spend it here, not now, not in this room where his brother was raw and a stranger was watching, and the variables were not yet under his control. Dominic Vance had not built anything, but he had spent his life managing the man who had, and he did not detonate things in rooms he did not own. "Nothing," Dominic said. He straightened too, smooth as a closing drawer. "She's got a face like someone. It'll come to me." He turned the full weight of his attention back onto his brother, and away from Wren, and she understood that she had just been granted a reprieve she had not earned and would not get to keep. Elliot, walk with me. 5 minutes. Then I'll let you go back to fixing radiators or whatever's happening to your shirt." They went out onto the porch, into the wind and the last of the rain, two dark shapes against the harbor lights, and Wren could not hear the words, but she could read the shapes. Dominic leaning in, urgent, the board, the journalist, Monday, Elliot still and resistant, his hand once at the inside of his wrist. When they came back in, Elliot's jaw was set, and Dominic wore the bland satisfaction of a man who had gotten 90% of what he came for and considered the last tenner matter of time. "My brother's staying the night," Elliot said. "Apparently I'm not to be trusted alone with my own decisions." It was meant to be light. It did not come out light. "Do you have a room?" "I have the green one," Wren said. "It whistles. It'll suit him," Elliot said, and there was an edge of something almost like apology in it, an awareness that the warm thing of the last 4 days had a stranger in it now, and would not be the same, and Wren took Dominic's information for the register. He paid with a card that probably had no limit, in a hand that pressed nothing, and gave him the green key, and the inn took on a new and colder geometry, 3 people in it now, who each knew a different fraction of the truth. She did not sleep. She lay in her small room behind the kitchen and listened to the green room whistle and the blue room stay silent at last, its valve fixed by a man who did not know whose roof he had mended. And somewhere past 2 in the morning she gave up on sleep and went out for water. Barefoot by the light of the banked stove, Dominic was in the dark parlor. He had not heard her. He was sitting in the window seat with the harbor at his back, and he did not look like the auditor now. He looked like a young man who had driven 6 hours on no sleep and was very far from home. He had his phone to his ear, and it was not a call. It was a voicemail, played and replayed, and in the silence of the sleeping house, Wren could just make out the tinny shape of Elliot's voice leaking from the speaker, some old, ordinary message, and Dominic was listening to it with his eyes shut and his hard face undone, his thumb moving over the dark glass as though he could touch the voice in it. On the seat beside him was his wallet, fallen open, and in it a photograph gone soft at the corners. 2 boys and a man who was plainly their father, a man Wren somehow knew without being told was no longer living, a man whose 2 sons had been left holding only each other and a company. She understood, standing barefoot in the cold doorway, that Dominic Vance was not here for money, or for the board, or even for Monday. He was here because his brother had vanished. And the last time someone he loved had vanished, it had been permanent, and a man learns to chase the ones who walk toward the dark. He was not a villain. He was a frightened person guarding the only thing he had left in the worst way he knew. Wren stepped back from the doorway. She did not let him know he had been seen. She went back to her room with the water she had not touched and lay awake until the gulls started, and the thing she had been able to do at a comfortable distance, hate the Vance machine, resent the cold men who had broken her family, got harder, the way everything in that house was getting harder, the longer she let herself actually see. He found her at the harbor at 7, which surprised her, because she had not thought Dominic Vance was a man who got up to watch anything. She was on the seawall, checking the storm's damage. A section of railing gone, a lobster trap smashed, the usual toll, and he came down the wet stones in city shoes with 2 coffees from nowhere and handed her one, and got, without preamble, directly to the number. "Here's where we are," Dominic said, looking out at the grey water instead of at her. "I know who you are. I knew it last night, the second I saw the picture. Wren Ashby, Naomi's little sister, the mother's in." He sipped his coffee. "I haven't told him. I'm not going to today. I'd rather handle it cleanly. And there's nothing clean about it if it happens in there." He nodded back up the hill at the inn. "So I'm going to make you an offer, and I'd like you to take it, because it's a good one, and it's the kind that gets worse the longer you make me wait. You don't know anything about me. I know you've got a roof that needs $8,000 and a boiler that's a season from quitting and an inn that loses money 8 months of the year." He had done his work in the dark hours. Of course he had. "I know my brother is the most guarded man alive, and he fixed your radiator and made a joke, and I haven't heard him make a joke since our father's funeral. I know that's worth something, and I know what it's worth to lose." He turned to her then, and his face was not cruel, which was almost worse. $40,000. Today you tell him a pipe burst. The inn's flooded. You've had to close. Terribly. Sorry. Here's a refund. Please go. He goes. He never finds out he spent a week sleeping over his ex-wife's family. He gets to keep the one good week he's had in years as a good week instead of one more place that turned out to be about her. And you fix your roof and your boiler, and you never see either of us again. Everybody wins. That's a rare thing. I'm offering you a rare thing. The wind came off the water, and Wren stood holding a coffee she did not want and felt the offer settle over her like the most reasonable thing in the world. $40,000. The roof and the boiler and the railing and 3 winters of breathing room. The secret kept, the warm week preserved, the detonation she had been dreading, simply purchased and made to go away. It was everything her whole life had taught her to take. The quiet exit, the kept peace, the truth folded small and paid to stay in its drawer. She could be safe, she could be solvent, she had only to do the thing she was already doing, the thing she had done at the Bell on Tuesday and in the firelight on Thursday and 100,000 times before that. Stay silent. Take the easy lie. Let the warm box of light keep glowing by never telling anyone what was burning under it. No, Wren said. Dominic blinked. It was the first thing she had done that he had not already priced. I'll go to 50. It isn't about the number. Her voice was very steady, and the steadiness came from somewhere old. Somewhere that had been waiting 2 years, since a hospital room and a comfortable lie, and a mother who left the world believing the wrong story, because Wren had not had the courage to give her the right one. You want to pay me to lie to him so he can keep a good week. I've spent my whole life paying for people's good weeks with lies. It's the family business, actually. We're very good at it. My sister built a whole marriage out of it, and then knocked it down and let the whole world blame the wrong person, and my mother kept that secret to her grave, and I. She stopped, because her voice had finally caught on the truest thing. I let her. I'm done. You can keep your money. He's going to find out who I am, and when he does, it's going to hurt him, and that's mine to have done, not yours to buy away. She set the untouched coffee on the broken railing. You think you're protecting him, she said. You're not. You're teaching him the same thing your father taught you both, that no one stays unless they're paid to, and no truth's so bad it can't be handled with a number. That's why he can't keep anything real. Not because he's cold, because everyone around him keeps making the world easy for him by lying. And a man can't grow up if the whole world keeps buying his bad weeks back. She looked at the smashed trap, the gone railing, the work the storm had left her. I have a wall to fix. Stay as long as you want. The green room's paid through Sunday. And she climbed back up the wet stones toward the inn, leaving Dominic Vance standing on the seawall with 2 coffees and $50,000. And for the first time in his managed life, no idea what the number was supposed to be. The next morning, the last of the weather cleared off entirely, the way it goes on this coast once a storm has spent itself. As though embarrassed by the fuss it had made, the sky came up scrubbed and enormous and pale gold, and the harbour lay flat and bright as a coin, and the gulls came back in a long arguing line over the water, and Wren found Elliot in the kitchen at 6:30 trying, and comprehensively failing, to make the old range kettle work. It doesn't have a switch, he said, with the bewilderment of a man who had stayed in the finest hotels on 4 continents and never once made his own tea. It's a kettle. It's a kettle from the previous century. How is there no switch? You put it on the heat, like a person from the previous century. Wren took it from him, filled it, set it on the range, lit the burner with the long match, and the whole transaction took 8 seconds, and he watched it like a magic trick. There, You can build a $400 million company, but you cannot operate a kettle. I'm putting that on the website. My company makes excellent tea. I have a man. You have a man for the tea. I have several men for several teas. He leaned against the counter, and the morning light was doing something to him, taking 10 years and all the armor, and he was almost smiling, and almost not bothering to hide it. It's a very inefficient kitchen, this. The range is 40 years old. The kettle predates electricity. The whole place runs on string and stubbornness, and a woman who lights matches like it's nothing. He picked up the long match, considered it, set it down. I should give it a terrible review. 1 star, non-functional kettle. Innkeeper smug about it. You wouldn't dare. 5 stars, he said quietly, and the joke turned over in his mouth into something that was not a joke at all. 5 stars. I'd give it 5 stars. The valve works now. The 3rd stair sticks, but you learn it. The coffee's included no matter how much you try to pay. It's the best place I've ever stayed, and it's a 5-room inn at the end of a road on a coast nobody comes to, and I have built 50 hotels trying to make a guest feel the way I've felt here for 6 days, and I have never once managed it. The kettle began, faintly, to tick toward boiling. I keep thinking about spring, he said, and he said it without flinching, future tense, plain. You said the gulls come back in spring. The water goes that color you talked about. I keep thinking I'd like to see the inn full. I'd like to fix the boiler before it quits. Properly, not with a check. I mean actually be here when the new one goes in and learn how the thing works. I'd like. He stopped and looked at her, and the want in his face was so undefended it was hard to look at. I don't do this, he said. I don't keep thinking about places or people. I learned a long time ago not to. And I've spent 6 days unlearning it in a kitchen with a kettle that has no switch, and I don't. His hand went toward the inside of his wrist and then deliberately did not. I don't want to go back to being the man who doesn't think about spring. The kettle came to the boil and began to scream, and neither of them moved to take it off. This was the moment. Wren knew it, the way she knew the bell, the way she knew the 3rd stair. The truth was right there, and the room was warm and golden, and he had just handed her his whole undefended heart across a 40-year-old range, and she could have set it down between them gently, now on her terms, in the kindest possible light. I have to tell you something, and it's going to be hard, but I think we can hold it. She could have given him the truth as the gift it might still, even now, have been. Given it before Dominic spent his terrible number. Given it the way you give someone news you intend to stand beside them through. She lifted the kettle off the heat instead. The scream stopped. The kitchen went quiet, and the quiet was beautiful and golden and built entirely out of everything she was not saying. Spring's a long way off, Wren said, and made the tea, and did not look at him while she did it. Because if she looked at him, she would tell him, and if she told him the morning would end, and she wanted. God forgive her, she wanted with her whole coward's heart. To keep the warm box of light glowing for 1 more hour before she had to watch it go out. She carried the 2 cups to the window table where he had sat on his first morning with his back to the wall, and they drank the tea in the enormous gold light, with the gulls arguing over the bright flat water, and for the length of 1 cup of tea, Wren Ashby and Elliot Vance sat inside the thing they had built without meaning to, the spring he was already living in. The someday he had decided after 20 years he might be built for after all. And it was the last hour of it, and only one of them knew, and she let it be beautiful anyway, and it was, and that was the cruelest thing she would ever do to either of them. It came apart at noon, and it came apart fast. The way the things you have braced against for a week always seem to when they finally come. Wren was up the ladder against the seawall railing, fitting the new rail she'd bought on credit at the hardware in town, when she heard the inn door and turned and saw Ellis Elliot standing on the porch with his phone in his hand and his face wrong. Not angry yet. That came after, but emptied. The face of a man reading something he could not make line up. Behind him stood Dominic, and Dominic was not gloating. That was the thing she would remember. Dominic had finally spent his number, and he looked, watching his brother's face, like a man who has set off something larger than he intended in a room he could not get out of in time. She came down the ladder. She crossed the wet grass. She knew before she reached the porch, and there was no part of her, by then, that wanted to keep running. "My brother has been doing his research," Elliot said. His voice was terribly level. He turned the phone so she could see it without really seeing it. A screen, a name, her mother's obituary, a wedding announcement 9 years old. Ashby, Wren Ashby. He said it the way you test a step you already know is rotten. Naomi's sister. This is. He looked up at the inn, at the blue room window, at the kitchen where the kettle had no switch. This was her mother's house. The arithmetic finished in him and she watched it land. You knew, when I walked in Tuesday, you knew who I was. Yes, Wren said. One word, the truest she'd ever said. I knew the second the bell rang. The wind moved over the harbour. Somewhere down the water, a halyard knocked against a mast. Knocked and knocked. 6 days, Elliot said. I told you about His jaw worked. He did not say the marriage. Even now he could not. I sat in your firelight with the power out and told you things I have never said to a living. Soul, and the whole time you were. He stopped. His hand went to the inside of his wrist and pressed there hard, and she saw him reach for the old armor and find it. The cold settling over him board by board, the man from the magazine covers reassembling himself out of the man who had wanted to see the gulls in spring. 6 days, he said again, quieter, and quieter was so much worse. And you said nothing, Elliot. Don't. Not loud. He had never once been loud. My brother thinks you kept me here on purpose. He thinks there's a journalist, and a woman with every reason in the world to hate me, and 6 days of access, and old family proof of whatever version of the story sells. He thinks I walked into the one inn on the eastern seaboard, where the past was waiting with the door open. He was not looking at her now. He was looking at the water, and his voice had gone to the flat place where she could not follow it. He's good at his job, my brother. He's usually right. He has been keeping me from being a fool for 20 years, and he has rarely, in all that time, been wrong about what people want from me. And there it was, the lie he lived in, awake and loud and wearing the day. Wren could see it move into him and make itself at home. Maybe she had been laughing at him from the first night. Maybe the firelight and the kettle and the valve and the spring had all been the long, patient setup of a woman who knew exactly what a lonely man was, worth on the open market. Maybe Wren was exactly what the rest of them had been, a hand held out across a range that turned out, when you reached for it, to be a bill. He did not say these things. He did not have to. She had spent 6 days learning his face, and she could read every one of them passing behind it, settling, hardening into the only story a man like him had ever been allowed to believe about, why a person stayed. There's no journalist, she said. I've never spoken to a journalist in my life. There's no plan, Elliot. There was never any plan. I run an inn. You walked into it. I didn't make you come here. But you let me stay. I let you stay, knowing why. And for 1 second the armor slipped, and what was under it was not the magazine man at all. It was the man from the kitchen, undefended, asking the only question that mattered to him. Why would you do that? Why would you sit there and let me, if not for something? People do not do that for nothing. What did you want? And this was the moment. The whole week had been walking toward this one square of porch, this one question, and Wren had the answer, and the answer was true. And she could feel that even now, even here, even this late, the true thing might have reached him, if she could only get it across the 6 feet of cold air between them. I wanted you to have 1 week where nobody had used you. I wanted to give you back a thing my family took. I have your letters, the ones you wrote her, the ones she never opened, and they prove you were not what they said. And I have been trying to find the courage to put them in your hands since Tuesday, and somewhere in the middle of trying, I fell so far into liking you that I could not bear to be the one who ended your good week. That is what I wanted. I wanted you to be all right. I have your letters, is what she said. Because she thought the proof would land where the feeling could not. Because she was an Ashby, and when the truth finally came out of her, it came out as evidence instead of as love. The ones you wrote Naomi, the last year. She never opened them. My mother kept them. They prove the story was wrong, Elliot. They prove you weren't. It was the worst possible thing she could have said, and she knew it the instant it was out, watched it hit him, and confirm every single thing Dominic had loaded into him on the long drive down. You have letters, Elliot said. The cold was complete now. The reassembly was finished. Of course you do. You've had them this whole time. 6 days. And you mention them now. He breathed out, slow, with no humor anywhere in it. Do you know what that is, Wren? Where I come from, that has a name. That is called leverage. That is exactly, precisely what that is. He pocketed the phone. Dominic, get the car. Elliot. Dominic's voice was strange, uncertain, for the first time since he'd arrived. Maybe we ought to get the car. And Dominic, who had wanted exactly this, and now stood looking like a man who had pulled a single thread to straighten a sleeve, and watched the whole coat come, apart in his hands, went and got the car. Elliot Vance went up the famous stair one last time, minding the third step out of a habit 1 week long, and came down 5 minutes later with his single leather bag. And on his way past the desk, he took out his wallet and set money on it. Too much money, the way he had on the very first morning, the only language for the only thing he believed people ever truly were to him. He set it down without looking at her. For the week, he said. You'll want the roof done before winter. I don't want your money. No. He stood in the doorway, the bell waiting over his head to ring its 2 late notes. I don't suppose you ever did. That's the part I'll have trouble with later. Right now, it's easier to decide you did. And for half a second, the undefended man looked out of the magazine man's eyes, one last time, ruined. It was the best week I've had in years, he said. I would have given it 5 stars. I would have come back in spring. You should have just let me think it was real for 1 more day. He went out. The bell rang, the second note late, undecided to the last, about whether the news was worth the ringing. The black car turned on the harbour road and was gone up the hill and over it. And the gulls went on arguing over the bright, flat, indifferent water, and Wren Ashby stood alone in the warm box of light she had kept burning on almost nothing for 2 years, and felt it at last go out. Not with a detonation, after all. With a closing door and the sound of a bell and a stack of money she would never spend, and the exact and total confirmation of the only thing she had ever truly believed. That the truth, when you finally found the courage to let it out, did not heal a single thing. It only ever cost. She picked up the money. She walked it into the kitchen, past Sully, who had heard all of it, and for once in her life had nothing dry to say. And she put every bill in the jar for the church roof, because she would rather the church had a roof than spend 1 cent of the price of the worst thing she had ever done. And then she went up to the blue room, where the valve he had fixed ticked over warm and steady in the empty quiet, and she lay down on the made bed in the room that still smelled faintly of him. And she did not cry, because crying was for people who had been wronged, and she had not been wronged. She had simply, finally, told the truth, and the truth had done what it always did. She lay there a long time, and the light went, and no one rang the bell, and for the first night in 6, the inn was only an inn again, and the spring he had talked about was just a season that came every year to a coast. Nobody visited to a woman who had been right her whole life about the cost of saying things, and had never once, until now, understood the price of saying nothing. For 3 days, Wren did what she had always done after a loss, which was work. She finished the seawall railing. She closed the 4 empty rooms for the season and left the blue one open, though she could not have said why and did not examine it. She paid the hardware bill in town with money that was not Elliot Vance's, and when Tom Brander found her on the harbour and asked, very gently, whether she was all right, she did not say "I'm fine." She had not said "I'm fine" in 6 days and found she could not go back to it. She said, "No, but I will be. Ask me in spring." And Tom, who understood more than people gave him credit for, tipped 2 fingers off an imaginary hat and let her be, and on the 3rd night she took the letters out of the drawer. She had not opened them in 2 years. They were Naomi's, then his, never hers, but she opened one now by lamplight at the kitchen table because she had decided what she was going to do with them, and she wanted to know what she was giving back. The hand was the one she knew, the hard downstroke, younger. "I do not know how to do this," the first one said. "I have built things my whole life, and I do not know how to build the one thing you actually wanted, which was for me to be in the room. Tell me how to be in the room. I will learn it. I have never failed to learn a thing I set my mind to, and I am setting my whole mind to this." She read 3 of them and stopped, because they were unbearable, because they were a man teaching himself in real time a language nobody had ever taught him, addressed to a woman who had already left the room and thrown the lessons away unopened. Wren did not read the rest. They were not hers to grieve over. Instead, she wrapped them, all of them, in clean paper, and she wrote a note to go on top, and the note was the hardest thing she had ever written, and the shortest. She did not defend herself in it. She did not explain about the firelight or the kettle or the way she had fallen. She did not ask for anything, because asking for something was the leverage he had accused her of. And she was done, forever, being a person who held a thing back to trade it. "These are yours," the note said. She wrote them to you to her. "These are the ones you wrote that she never opened. My mother kept them. I should have given them to you on Tuesday. I should have given you a great many true things on Tuesday, and I gave you silence instead, because I have always been a coward about the truth, and you were the person who finally cost me too much to stay one. You were not what they said you were. You were not cold. I'm sorry it took me a week and your whole heart to tell you so. You owe me nothing. There is no second envelope. W." She mailed it in the morning to the corporate address, the only one she had, and she did it before she could lose her nerve. And walking back from the post office in the thin, cold light, she felt something she had not felt in 2 years since a hospital room and a comfortable lie. Not happiness, nothing so large, but the specific clean lightness of a stone finally set down. She had told the truth and asked for nothing in return. Whatever it cost now, it was the price of the right thing, and she found she could carry that. It was a different weight entirely from the other one. Dominic Vance came back to the inn on a Thursday. She heard the car before the bell, and she came out from the kitchen drying her hands. And he was standing in the front hall in the same city clothes, looking less like an auditor and more like a man who had not been sleeping. He did not say, "Here's where we are." He stood for a moment as though he had forgotten the speech he'd prepared, and then he crossed to the desk and set something on it. A slim folder, plain, unmarked, and slid it toward her across the wood. "That's everything I had," he said. "On you, on your sister, on your mother's estate, the inn's debt, all of it. It's the only copy that matters, and it's yours. Burn it, frame it, I don't care, He stopped. "I'm not in the business of having things on people I was wrong about." Wren opened the folder. One line near the top was enough. Ashby, Wren E. Subject refused settlement offer, 50,006 oct, declined to leverage. And she understood that he had written down in his own auditor's hand the exact moment she had refused his money, and had carried it 3 days, and it had not let him sleep. "He hasn't read your letters," Dominic said. "They're sitting on his desk. He won't open them. He's decided opening them is the same as believing you. And he'd rather not believe you, because believing you means I was wrong, and means he ran from the one good thing because I told him to. He looked, suddenly, very young. I told him you turned down $50,000. I told him there was no journalist. There was never a journalist. I made the journalist up. I made it all up because he was happy, and happy made him stupid, and stupid scared me. The confession cost him visibly. She watched it leave him like color leaving a face. He won't hear it from me. He's heard everything from me for 20 years, and it turns out the one time it mattered, I was protecting him straight into the ground. So, Dominic squared his shoulders, the gesture of a man surrendering the only authority he had ever held. I came to tell you he's at the house on the Cape, alone, not answering me, and to say I'm sorry. I don't say that. I find I don't like how it feels, and I think that means I should have said it more. He turned for the door. Go and make him open the envelope, Wren. He'll open the door for you. He won't for me. Not anymore. The bell rang him out, 2 late notes, and Wren stood holding a folder full of the worst week of her life, and understood that the truth had, in fact, done something after all. It had turned the man who'd lit the fuse into the man holding the door. She did not go to the Cape. She thought about it the whole drive she did not take. The grand gesture, the door on the cliff, the standing in the rain. But she had spent her life performing the version of things that kept the peace. And she was done performing, even the good performances. She had given him the truth, and asked for nothing, and she had meant the nothing. If she drove to his door now and stood in his rain, she would be asking. So she went home, and she opened the blue room for no guest, and she waited, not for him. She made herself be honest about that, lying awake, not for him, but in the particular open way of a person who has finally stopped holding the door shut from the inside. He came on the 6th day at 4 in the last grey light, with the rain coming sideways off the harbour. She knew the car. She was at the desk straightening the registration cards, and the bell rang its 2 late notes, and she lifted her head, with the welcome already shaped in her mouth, and could not say it again, for an entirely different reason this time. Elliot Vance stood in the doorway, shaking the rain from a charcoal coat, water running off him onto her clean floor, and in his hand was a packet of letters wrapped in clean paper, opened now, the string undone. "The 3rd stair sticks," he said. His voice was not level. It was the kitchen voice, the undefended one, all the armor gone and not reassembling this time. "You told me that on the 1st day. You told me true about the stair and the valve and the coffee, and you'd told me true about everything, the whole week, every small thing, and the one large thing you couldn't say you finally wrote down and mailed to me and asked for nothing." He held up the letters. I read them, all of them. Mine to her that she never opened, and then I read yours, the short one, about 40 times, and the part I keep. His hand started toward his wrist, and stopped deliberately, and stayed at his side. "There is no second envelope. You wrote that." A woman with every reason to want something from me handed me the only leverage she had, and told me there was no second envelope, and I have spent 6 days in an empty house on the Cape, learning that I would rather be a fool who believed you than a clever man who didn't. Elliot, I have to say the rest of it, or I'll lose my nerve, and I've only just found it. He came in out of the doorway, minding nothing now, crossing to the desk. "The story was wrong, but not the way you think. I wasn't only the cold one, and I wasn't only the wronged one. I stopped being in the room years before she left it, and I let her go without a fight, because fighting meant admitting. I wanted something I might not get. And I have never in my life been able to want something out loud that I might not get. I let the world call me cold, because cold is what you get to be when you've decided never to want anything where people can see you do it." He set the letters on the desk between them, the way Dominic had set the folder, the way Elliot himself had set the money. Except that this was the opposite of the money. This was the surrender of the armor instead of its language. I told my board the truth this week. About the marriage. About why I disappeared. I gave the real version to the one journalist who actually existed, and it cost me a deal and a great deal of dignity, and I have never felt better about anything. I'm done being the headline. I came to ask. And here the man who could not want anything out loud where it might be denied him stood in a flooding doorway and did the bravest thing she ever saw him do. I came to ask if it's too late to see the gulls come back. I know what you are to her. I don't care. I care that you lit the lamps when the power went and let me sit in it. I care that you refused $50,000 and put my money in a church jar. I care about spring, Wren. I care about it out loud, where you can hear me, where you can say no. The rain came down. The bell hung silent over his head. Somewhere in the kitchen, Sully had very quietly stopped pretending to dry a pan, and Wren Ashby, who had spent her whole life choosing the silence that kept the warm box of light glowing one more hour, looked at the man who had come back through her door to want something out loud where she could deny him, and made the other choice, the one her mother never got the true version of. The one that cost the most because it could be refused and wasn't. "You'll want to get out of that coat," she said, what she had said the first time, except that this time her voice was not even at all. This time it shook, and she came around the desk, and she did not straighten a single thing on it, and she took the wet coat from his shoulders, the way you take a thing from someone who is finally, after 6 days and 9 years, and a whole life of paying for other people's good weeks, going to be allowed to stay. The gulls came back to Pearl Harbor in April, in a long arguing line over water, gone the exact blue wren had promised him in the dark 6 months before, and the bell over the door of the Salt Glass Inn rang so often that spring that Sully threatened to take it down and feed it to the harbor. It rang for the painters and for the man who came to put in the new boiler. And Elliot was there for that, on his knees on the cellar floor in a shirt that had given up its corporate life entirely, learning how the thing worked from a plumber named Earl, who did not know or care that his apprentice for the afternoon had once run 50 hotels, and who told Wren afterward that the fella was all right with his hands once you got the watch off him. It rang for guests, real ones, paying ones, because it turned out that a small inn at the end of a road on a coast nobody came to became a place people very much came to once a certain kind of word got around. Though Wren never did put the kettle on the website, and never did let Elliot give the place the terrible 1-star review, he still occasionally threatened over the third stair, which they had both agreed, by then, was load-bearing to the inn's entire character and would be repaired over neither of their dead bodies. Naomi wrote, once, in the early summer, a long letter from Lisbon, performed and warm and full of everyone's full names. "Darling Wren, you must understand, I always only wanted." And Wren read it through twice and felt, where the old anger used to live, mostly a kind of tiredness on her sister's behalf, the tiredness you feel for someone still building marriages out of the family lie, while you have finally, at great cost, stopped. She did not write back a cruel thing. She did not write back a comfortable lie. She wrote back the true short thing, which was that she was well, and that she had given Elliot his letters, and that she hoped Naomi was finding the room she'd left them all looking for. Then she put the letter in the drawer that no longer had anything heavy in it, and went downstairs, where the man her sister had let the world call cold was arguing cheerfully with Sully about the correct way to lay a fire. Dominic came at midsummer. He stood in the doorway a long moment, as though unsure of his welcome, which he was right to be, and which Wren made him feel for exactly as long as was good for him, and not 1 minute longer, and then she put him to work carrying linens, because the surest way she knew to forgive a man was to hand him a task, and the surest way she knew to let him forgive himself was to let him be useful in a house that ran on string and stubbornness instead of on numbers. He was bad at it and got better. He learned the third stare. By the end of the weekend, he had stopped flinching every time his brother laughed, as though a laugh were a thing that had to be paid for. And on the last morning, Wren caught the two of them on the seawall in the early light, not talking, just standing, two boys and the water and no father between them anymore, to teach them that staying had a price. And she did not interrupt it, and she did not straighten anything, and she went inside and put the kettle on. He found her in the kitchen, the way he had on the 6th morning of the worst and best week of both their lives. The light was coming up gold over the flat, bright water, and the gulls were at their endless argument, and the kettle from the previous century with no switch, was beginning to tick toward the boil on the 40-year-old range. "I've been thinking," Elliot said, leaning in the doorway, watching her hands, "about the review. Don't you dare." 5 stars, he said, and crossed the kitchen, and this time it was not a joke turning into something true. This time it was just true, said plainly, out loud, where she could hear it, and where there was nothing left in either of them that needed to deny it. 5 stars. Failing valve, fixed. Third stair, sticks, never touch it. Coffee included no matter how hard you try to pay. He took the long match from her hand and lit the burner himself, which he had finally learned to do, and got it on the first strike, and looked absurdly pleased with himself about it. "Best place I've ever stayed. I came in out of the rain to disappear, and the innkeeper recognized me the moment I stepped through the door." He set down the match, and thank God, she didn't say nothing. The kettle came to the boil and began to scream, and this time Wren reached over and lifted it off the heat at once. The way you tend the small good things before they can burn, and poured the tea, and carried the 2 cups to the window table where the morning was coming up over the harbor, and the bell over the door rang its 2 late notes, undecided as ever about whether the news was worth the ringing. And this time, every time now, it was.